if you had to ask me, where do I think AI will be most important? I think already it's going to, I think in the short term, in fact, you can ask ChatGPT where it thinks it's going to be most important. It gives a good answer.
Your work that won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, for work you did in the 70s, right? And you must have seen so much technological change since.
Yeah.
Looking forward, how is AI going to answer some of the questions you've spent your career pondering? Is it going to be a massive accelerator? How do you see it fitting into the overall scientific equation?
I think AI will be, there are other things that have had a huge influence in our lives. For example, calculators. We all used to worry about calculating, and then I remember in the early 70s, got a programmable calculator. Cell phones are the greatest exposure smartphones of everybody to really powerful computers full of AI. And, 2-year-old kids are pretty good at them. So I think that, I don't expect a discontinuity. I think human beings are amazingly good at adapting. Obviously, when you get older, you have to make an effort. Going back to what you said about my early work, I think, when I was probably 14 years old, this is 1961 or something like this, I first heard about a computer playing a game. It was tic-tac-toe. And this had a huge influence on me because I felt that games were very different from multiplying numbers or doing mathematics. And I got exposed to computers pretty early on. And I think in some ways, one of the reasons why I went into structural biology was they were using very large computers. So in some ways, I think if I'd grown up today, I would have become a hacker instead of a scientist. I'm actually very proud of the fact that I can still write code, and I'm good for my age, which of course is a great disclaimer because people of my age are really bad at coding, so I don't have to be very good, but I try to keep up. And I just find it, it's like a pianist playing the piano. I actually feel that when I'm writing code, I'm actually doing something creative. With things like ChatGPT, it actually, I heard about it probably at the beginning of December, and we were with friends. My wife is an art curator, and she had to give a speech opening an exhibition of a Chinese artist in Israel. We were at the beach, and as a joke, she asked ChatGPT to write a speech for an opening of an exhibition, by this artist. And the speeches were very good. In those days, very early on in ChatGPT, you could just say, try again, and you'd get another version. Now you can sort of do that, but it's not so obvious. And, it was like amazing. And in the end, she basically gave a speech which accepted those two speeches, quoted a bit from them, but then said what I really wanted to say is X. So I think it can push you forward. I have made an effort to actually play with ChatGPT. So I try every day to ask it things. And I'm actually more and more amazed. I find it extremely good for medical questions. I find it extremely good for if you're trying to get into a new area of research. Just to ask about it, you suddenly get the names of the people. You can then follow up with Google searches. And in fact, it reminded me of what I call my Google moment. Google started at Stanford, and I was using it in 1968. Most people didn't hear about Google until about 2001. So I realized very early on that it was incredibly powerful compared to the existing search engines, which were quite bad. And I would meet people and say, look, I'm going to, stop, think where you are, look around. You're going to remember this moment for the rest of your life. And they'd look at me like I'm crazy, and I'd say, Google. Of course, I didn't buy any shares, but my students did. So, they were very happy. So I think it is, ChatGPT, for me, it's actually amazing how mature it was when it came out. Subsequently, I've tried playing with, Microsoft Bing. I don't find it nearly as good. One thing that I actually did is to ask ChatGPT something. Initially when you start out, you want to ask it to do something where you think you know the answer, but people don't. And I just asked it to tell me about Michael Levitt and COVID. My wife said I was incredibly narcissistic, but I asked it 20 times, and I recorded all the answers. And they were varying a lot, and some were completely wrong. But in many ways, they would say much more favorable than I would have assumed from my Twitter environment. So it made me realize that, a machine just sitting there, presumably not knowing anything about me being, just by reading it, was able to form an opinion that I thought was actually quite balanced and the critique in a good place. So I do think it's going to be very, very important. I think it's going to be, in journalism, very useful. But I do think we need to learn how to use it. And I don't think it's a bit like Google. A good Google user knows how to ask a good question. And I think a lot of the onus of doing new research and getting new things is asking questions. So, for example, as a joke, I asked Google, please interview Michael Levitt about COVID. And it really asked nice questions. And we didn't do an interview, we just said, give me the questions. Perhaps if I'd answered, it would have continued that way. I think it's amazing. And I think I've actually subscribed. There's a course on ChatGPT currently at Stanford, and they've had various guest speakers. And what's interesting is there seems to be what is called an emergent phenomena. And so emergent phenomena are the example that I always think is the most mundane, goes back to liquid water. So water is H2O, it's a simple molecule. But as liquids go, water is really complicated. The fact that ice floats on water is important and all these things. But it turns out that there used to be lots and lots of theories about why water had all these properties, sort of like macroscopic theories. And then in 1969, Raman and Stillinger did a molecular dynamic simulation of water. This is about the same time that we were working on proteins, so I was already in the field. And lo and behold, if you just take a bunch of water molecules with very simple properties and have them interact, you've got something that was, in some ways, the sum was more than, the total was more than the sum of the parts. And what they were saying with these language models is that if you double the size or you increase the size of the language model by tenfold, it isn't just 10 times more knowledgeable. It's able to do things that were not possible before. So I think this is really interesting. Go ahead.
Just seeing the latest, the public-facing model of ChatGPT 3.5, right? 4 is coming, and it's going to be an exponential leap forward again. Where do you mentioned Google? Where do you rank the large language models against Google? Is it as seismic a development or as advanced as Google?
I think it's different. I think it's different. I think that I found it very useful, as I said, for looking into medical conditions, but basically. So my own work has changed a lot. I mean, when the pandemic started, I started to work on COVID and become very involved in that. Now I see what I call computational biology applied globally. So COVID, if you like, is a computational, it's numbers, models, analysis. So is climate change. And I'm trying to expand, a good scientist appreciate that the numbers are trying to destroy his career and fool him. So you have to be incredibly skeptical of everything you do. People don't, the lay public doesn't realize just if you aren't self-skeptical, I mean, no one can check you as well as you can. And if you aren't, so this has been very interesting, and I got interested in demography, but I didn't really know anything about it. I've never taken a class in it. So it was interesting to ask ChatGPT, tell me about demography. And it's particularly useful if you have a conversation. So, give me a general outline, then it would say, well, can you tell me more? And I think with time, you learn how to coach it in the sense of pushing it into certain directions. I'm looking forward to the more advanced models, but I do think the name of the game is to play with it. I somehow see most of my work as playing with things. I play with myself. I probably use a cell phone as well as I don't text as well as a teenager, but I'm pretty good, and I'm continually getting new apps and learning stuff because that's the name of the game. And I think technology is amazing, and I think it's really important, particularly when you get older. Smartphones are really essential for older people. I would almost say that if I was running the national health or whatever, I would basically say, everyone who reaches the age of 65 gets a smartphone. and it's taken away from them if they don't show that they're using it or something like that or whatever. Because it's unbelievable. I travel a lot. I'm in China quite a lot. I don't speak any Chinese, but with my phone, I manage incredibly well. I can translate all things. I mean, I don't know, one thing that I didn't realize I could do, but I do now, whenever I go to a meeting, I just take a photograph of the agenda. It goes into my photographs. It gets optically character scanned. And this means I can go in at any time and just search for names. So this is amazing. You know, I mean, it's this kind of, but it didn't exist in 3 versions ago or so on. So I think playing with things is incredibly important. I think, you know, AI is going to change everything, but, you know, so did smartphones and so did the internet and many other things. You know, I have been, I guess, very interested in AI. AI is not a new field at all. Anyone who thinks AI is a new field is, but I remember when I was doing my PhD in Cambridge in 1967, 68, there was a lot of very good AI coming out of Edinburgh. Edinburgh had a very powerful unit in AI, and there were big books, of course, the library. They just didn't have the computer time. And if you actually ask, and this is again something which is, I like things that are sort of curiosities, things that are not obviously expected. But, you know, what made AI possible is not the supercomputers. It's not this, it's basically teenagers playing video games, pushed forward the advance of graphical processor units, and suddenly computing became a factor of 100 times faster. And remember, it's not the speed, it's the speed per pound or per dollar. I mean, you know, you can always make a big computer very fast by spending enough money on it. But suddenly the price per multiply went down enormously. It's also very nice. I mean, what is special about AI, and it takes a while to understand it, basically, these very large neural nets are able to take any function and make it into a function that's very easy to optimize. So you can put, and the optimization is done in a clever way. It's not done by like what is the best result in terms of fitting previous data. In some ways, it's done by, you know, what do human beings think about the answers and so on. If you had to ask me, where do I think AI will be most important? I think already it's going to, you know, I think in the short term, in fact, you can ask ChatGPT where it thinks it's going to be most important. It gives a good answer. You know, obviously in medical things, there's so much information and doctors just can't do it.
Is that, in your opinion, is that going to be the biggest area in terms of?
I don't, you know, saying the biggest is, I'm actually very much against ranking. People love to rank, but it's impossible. You know, there was a Nobel Prize given to Ken Arrow for showing that ranking is only possible in one dimension. So maybe if you said biggest, and I said, well, okay, you know, by numbers of users, maybe by dollars, I don't know. I think it's going to be very important. I think healthcare is an area where overall the phone needs to be the portal to healthcare. And not just the fact that you call up your doctor, they say, you know, it should almost be that every morning when you open your phone and you use facial recognition, you think you're opening the phone, but the phone is actually looking at you and might say, you know, you look a bit peakish. How did you sleep last night? You know, have you had water? I mean, I think a lot of healthcare, there's an awful amount of a huge amount of low-hanging fruit in healthcare. Just, and this is where we see the placebo effect. Just having your phone saying, you know, when you were speaking on the phone yesterday, you sounded hoarse. You know, is your throat okay? You know, have you thought about, and very often the remedies, we just forget. The remedies are often very, very simple. You know, you sound tense. Have you been for a walk? You know, are you drinking enough water? I mean, these things are all very, very important. And there's no reason why phones couldn't just simply, either by analyzing you or analyzing people, use AI like that. So I think, you know, that's going to be important use. I think for me, I actually wrote an opinion piece very early on in the beginning of COVID, I think in March or beginning of April 2020. That was actually commissioned by the Wall Street Journal, but when they got it, they didn't like it, so it just disappeared. But my very last line there was saying that COVID, this is very early, seems to be a good model for future disruptions. And I'm not that impressed about how we're behaving. I didn't realize it was going to go on for another 2 years and it was going to get worse and worse and worse. But I said there, I hope that AI develops sufficiently that the next time this happens, I can say, hey, Google, Alexa, Siri, should I panic and believe the results? And I think that's another area, global risk management. People are really, really bad at knowing what's dangerous. You know, probably crossing roads is a major danger. Just neglecting yourself, getting depressed. These are really dangerous, you know, not getting cancer checkups. So I think that AI could be very important. I would love to see AI used in government. And again, I had an image probably more than 10 years ago when Jeopardy, where IBM's big computer, Big Blue, played Jeopardy very well. It had already dismissed the world chess champion, but you know, Jeopardy is probably harder than playing chess, at least in terms of computers. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a, say in the United States, a constitutional law where before the president did anything, he had to go to Watson, what the computer was called, and say, hey, Watson, should I invade Afghanistan? And Watson might come back saying, no, that's a terrible idea. You don't do it because of da. And the president wouldn't have to do anything, but that response would go into the public record, maybe be hidden for the lifetime of the president, but would be there. So I do think that the level of stupid decisions made politically that have massive ramifications are just incredible. And things where, you know, for example, I mean, ChatGPT generally refuses to answer current affair questions. But, you know, Brexit, you know, is it a good idea? And again, it would be interesting. And the answer would have to be no, not just no. It would have to be, well, you know, there's this, you know, how do all these things line up? I like the way that ChatGPT starts with an opening paragraph, 5 points and a closing paragraph. It's got a very, I mean, I think you can learn very nicely about clean, boring writing. It's sort of boring, but it's clean, and it's better than most students do. So I think it really is a whole new world. And I think that, you know, I just hope it doesn't get spoiled. I worry that people will be using ChatGPT for all sorts of spoiling things, like making it adopt alternative personalities and behaving stupidly. Well, you know, that's okay. You know, I guess people get drunk. I'm not particularly worried about the consequences because I actually believe that no matter how good computers are, and I'm going to just say computers because AI is just, and how people and computers will always be better than just computers or just people. So the idea is to work on the interface. And, you know, if you just look around at our world, on the one hand, you have people doing amazing science. On the other hand, you have a lot of stupid things going on. So we want to be able to get everything improved. So I'm actually amazingly upbeat. I think that this is a very important discovery. I think people need to be encouraged. I think schooling needs to change. For a long time, people would say to me, well, you know, how should schooling? And I basically have given lectures where I've said, as far as I'm concerned, anything that is in Google shouldn't be taught. That means not algebra, not mathematics, not spelling, probably not writing, but still, how to use these things needs to be taught. Everybody who doesn't need a new, you know, I mean, email and all of these things should be compulsory at school. Learning how to search properly should be compulsory. Those are the important things. That's what's going to get you on. And I guess the good thing is that teenagers spend all their life on the phone, so they know how to do this stuff. I think it's good to deal with things that are current. Being in an ivory tower is a luxury that I don't think I can afford. And in some ways, you know, I care a lot about young people. I mean, I've said this time and time again. Just as a final story, when my eldest grandson is almost 20, And when he was like 8 or 9, he said to me, would I like to live forever? And I remember very distinctly saying, look, if I live forever, then the chances are that everyone lives forever because I'm not that special. This is before the Nobel Prize. Now I would have definitely said only Nobel laureates live forever. Anyway, don't quote me on that, although it'd be a joke. And I said to him, look, if people live forever, it's the end of young people. And I would much rather not live forever and have young people in the world. And I firmly believe that. On the other hand, if we looked forward to a new world where ChatGPT and robots are smarter than people, maybe not as innovative, but maybe just as innovative, then, we probably don't need young people. We probably don't need people. I believe that a truly smart robot would keep people around because currently the greatest intelligence on Earth is not ChatGPT, it's not people, it's biology. Because biology made all life on Earth. And they did it not by some clicking fingers. It wasn't a creation. It was done through creating, maybe by God, an incredibly intricate system of molecular biology that led to this life emerging. And that in itself, if I was a synthetic robot that had been created by people, I would want to keep this example of this amazing random creation of life around. So this is my good view of the long term. I think being optimistic is really important. I think also it's good for you. I think panic destroys. There was recently a paper in Nature that basically said that your immune system depends on your state of mind. Basically, if you're very negative, why bother? And we've seen this, people aging. Hardly anyone dies the day before Christmas. Literally, there's a blip in the numbers. I fortunately had a mother who lived in good health until 107.
Wow.
And, and she did it by being never complaining, being super optimistic about things. She went on a vacation 8 weeks before she died. She went from London to the Canary Islands for a week's vacation. So that's the way to go. And then she decided she had had enough and stopped eating. And we didn't want to take her to hospital. She didn't want to go. So I think, I think we have to believe in people.